It had been over a decade since Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 vanished. For most people, the mystery was buried beneath years of failed searches, shifting theories, and silent grief. But in 2025, something surfaced, not from the ocean, but from the archives. A small team of independent satellite analysts were re-examining old radar datasets from March 8, 2014. Among thousands of hours of static and background noise, they noticed something that should not have been there. A faint but structured digital ping appearing at 0:28 UTC, nearly 6 minutes after the aircraft's final confirmed signal. It wasn't a random artifact. It carried MH370's transponder signature, a unique digital ID belonging to no other aircraft on Earth. At first, nobody wanted to believe it. After all, hundreds of anomalies had been reported over the years. Radar blips, false echoes, fragments of radio chatter. But this was different. The data came from the South Indian Ocean, hundreds of kilometers south of the established search zone. If genuine, it meant MH370 had not crashed when and where experts believed. It meant it was still flying, at least for a little while longer. The analysts dubbed it the phantom ping. It was short, inconsistent, and incomplete, but structured enough to suggest a system still alive, trying to connect. The discovery reignited discussions long thought to be over. Aviation journalists began revisiting the case. Satellite engineers tried to reconstruct what might have caused the delayed ping. One theory suggested that MH370's communication system had restarted, possibly due to electrical fluctuations after running on auxiliary power. Others believed it was the plane's onboard satellite data unit, automatically attempting to reconnect to the Inmarsat network. But even if it was an automated handshake, it meant one terrifying thing. The plane was still airborne, gliding silently through the darkness, far beyond any radar coverage. The implications were enormous. If the signal was authentic, the aircraft's final position had been miscalculated by hundreds of miles. Search zones costing billions of dollars may have been drawn in the wrong place. The discovery undermined the official narrative that MH370 had crashed shortly after losing contact. Instead, it painted a darker, stranger picture. A plane deliberately avoiding detection, guided by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. In aviation circles, whispers began again. Could the disappearance have been planned? Had the pilot, Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, intentionally diverted the flight, or had someone else gained control? The families of the 239 missing passengers were split between hope and despair. For them, the phantom ping represented both proof their loved ones might have survived longer than anyone imagined, and evidence that someone, somewhere, still wasn't telling the full truth. Governments remained silent. Malaysia, Australia, and China declined to reopen official searches. But in online forums and among private investigators, the hunt reignited. Independent researchers pored over terabytes of radar and satellite data, desperate to find more hidden anomalies. For the first time in years, the name MH370 began trending again. The phantom ping was weak, incomplete, and open to interpretation. But it was something. After a decade of silence, even a whisper felt like a revelation. It was as if the plane itself, lost beneath endless waves, had found a way to speak again one last time. Months after news of the phantom ping reignited public interest. A small oceanographic research vessel called the Orpheus was charting unexplored stretches of seabed off the coast of Madagascar. The crew wasn't searching for MH370. Their mission was geological. But one morning, their sonar picked up something strange. A massive rectangular shadow resting nearly 3,800 meters below the surface. It was too smooth, too even, to be a natural formation. At first, the team thought it was an error. Sonar ghosts were common in deep-sea scans, but when they ran the pass again, the shadow was still there. It measured almost 30 meters long, with clear angles and a metallic density signature. The shape looked man-made. When the coordinates were later plotted, a collective chill ran through the team. It was located roughly 850 kilometers west of the official MH370 search zone, the same direction indicated by the phantom ping. They decided to send down a remotely operated vehicle, a small submersible fitted with floodlights and cameras. As it descended through the black water, visibility dropped to almost nothing. The crew watched in silence from the surface as the screen flickered rock, silt, coral, then something different. Riveted aluminum, torn metal coated in marine growth, half buried in the sediment. At 3,800 meters below, the ocean preserves nothing perfectly, but even so, the contours were unmistakable. A section of fuselage, possibly from a wide-body aircraft. The footage leaked online before authorities could react. Within days, aviation forums exploded with speculation. Independent experts analyzed every frame, comparing rivet spacing, curvature, and metal composition to known specifications of a Boeing 777. The similarities were undeniable. Even the paint remnants, dull white with faint traces of blue, matched Malaysia Airlines color scheme. If this was authentic, it changed everything. The debris suggested that MH370 had flown much farther than predicted, ending its journey along a corridor no one had searched. Ocean drift models suddenly made sense. The earlier debris found on Reunion Island and Mozambique could easily have drifted from that same southern region over the years, but official agencies refused to comment. Malaysia's Transport Ministry called the evidence inconclusive. Australia dismissed the footage as unverified. Critics claimed it was clickbait. A deep-sea illusion misidentified by over-edger researchers. Yet behind closed doors, analysts knew the data fit too neatly to ignore. One marine engineer, part of the Orpheus expedition, later told a reporter anonymously, "What we found didn't look like a geological formation. It looked like wreckage. And if it isn't MH370, then we have to ask, what else is down there?" The discovery also raised a darker question. If the wreckage lay so far from the last known position, what had happened in those final hours? Was the aircraft still controlled? Had it glided deliberately to this location? In the deep ocean, answers are buried with the dead. But the footage from the Orpheus added one undeniable truth. The ocean had swallowed the mystery completely. Something or someone had guided that plane farther south than anyone ever imagined. And if that's true, then the official story of MH370, the one the world accepted for years, might be wrong. For years, experts claimed they had analyzed every possible route, every deviation, every radar echo. Yet somehow, amid the thousands of data points and endless satellite arcs, one pattern had been hiding in plain sight, a sequence of movements so deliberate it defied random chance. It all began when a retired French aerospace engineer named Jean-Luc Moreau revisited the flight path in early 2024. Moreau wasn't an official investigator, but he was obsessive, the kind of man who spent his evenings poring over ADS-B data, reconstructing flight paths of lost aircraft just for the challenge. One night, while comparing the Malaysian radar returns with the Inmarsat pings, he noticed something strange. Every recorded position of MH370, every faint digital whisper aligned with the coordinates of military navigation waypoints. Not random ones, but those used by older Cold War patrol aircraft. These weren't civilian routes, and there was no reason a Boeing 777 full of passengers should have been flying them. At first, he dismissed it as coincidence. But the deeper he dug, the less random it appeared. When he overlaid the path with declassified Australian military charts, the hair on his neck stood up. Each turn matched precisely with a waypoint series known as N571, a route used by reconnaissance flights to remain hidden from radar during the 1980s. The odds of a modern jetliner following that route by accident were almost zero. And then came the question no one could easily answer: who programmed that path? The official theory stated the plane had been manually turned toward the south after a sudden decompression or electrical failure. But Moreau's data implied something more controlled, even tactical. The movements were too clean, too consistent. A commercial pilot, even under stress, wouldn't have plotted a path that deliberately threaded through gaps in radar coverage. That took knowledge and planning. When Morrow presented his findings on a small aviation forum, it barely gained traction. A handful of enthusiasts debated him. A few journalists took notes, and then the thread went silent. But a week later, his post was quietly removed. The forum admin claimed it was for data sensitivity. Morrow knew better. Someone didn't want that pattern spreading. Months later, an anonymous email landed in his inbox. No sender, no name, just a single sentence. You're not the first to notice the pattern. Attached was a zipped folder labeled Satri Route _2703. Inside were logs, supposedly from a private satellite relay in the Indian Ocean. Dated March 2014, the logs indicated brief bursts of data transmission between MH370's SATCOM system and an unregistered node off the coast of Diego Garcia, a military base long shrouded in secrecy. Was the plane communicating with someone, or was it being redirected? If these files were authentic, they suggested the aircraft wasn't just lost, it was following instructions. Morrow reached out to an aviation journalist in London, planning to meet and hand over the evidence. But 2 days before the meeting, Morrow vanished. His apartment in Toulouse was left unlocked, computer missing, and the only trace of him was an empty coffee cup, still warm on the desk. When investigators arrived, they found one thing left behind: a single printed page from his research. On it were the coordinates of the N571 waypoint chain, the same path MH370 had taken before vanishing forever. The pattern nobody saw had finally been noticed, and someone made sure it stayed hidden. It began with a late-night call from a number that didn't exist, at least not on any record the journalists could trace. The voice on the other end was calm, deliberate, with that faint metallic tone of someone speaking through a voice modulator. If you really want to know what happened to MH370, the caller said, you need to find the pilot's second logbook. The one Malaysia never released. The line went dead. The journalist Clara Reed, an aviation correspondent for The Guardian, sat in silence. She'd spent years chasing ghosts, hearing wild theories about hijackings, secret landings, and underwater wreckage. But something about this felt different. The voice wasn't selling a theory. It was offering evidence. 2 weeks later, a small brown envelope arrived at her office. No return address, no markings, just her name scrawled in block letters. Inside was a USB stick, sealed with a strip of red tape that read Flight Ops Confidential. Against her better judgment, she plugged it in. The folder contained scanned pages, handwritten entries, clearly from a pilot's logbook. At the top of each page was the name Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, MH370's pilot in command. Most of the entries looked normal: flight hours, weather notes, route coordinates. But then the tone changed. On the last 5 pages, the handwriting grew tighter, more urgent. There were fragments that seemed to hint at growing paranoia, or perhaps knowledge of something he couldn't say aloud. They're watching the simulator. 2 men from Training Command asked about fuel range to Southern. Corridor cannot say anything. But if I disappear, check waypoints. Clara's hands trembled as she scrolled through the rest of the files. Alongside the scans were flight simulator data logs, the same data authorities had previously claimed were deleted from Zahari's computer before being recovered. But these weren't the same files. These showed practice flights over the Indian Ocean, but not random ones. Each simulated route mirrored the exact N571 path identified by Jean-Luc Moreau, down to the very last turn. It was as if Zahari had flown that route before. Not in the cockpit, but in secret, alone, at home. Then came the strangest part. A folder labeled DG Brief, just a single document. Inside, a typed note read, "Confirm landing zone cleared. Fuel sufficient. Proceed as instructed." Code: Whisper Route. Below that, a coordinate: 718S, 7224, near Diego Garcia. Clara cross-checked it with naval charts. The point lay right along the southern arc where the plane's last ping was recorded. Her pulse quickened. If this logbook was genuine, it didn't just imply Zahari was complicit. It suggested he was following orders. She knew what came next. She had to verify it. She contacted her editor, arranged a meeting for the next morning, but she never made it. Security cameras outside her London flat caught her stepping into a black van at 10:42 p.m. The footage cut out 15 seconds later. The van was never identified, and Clara was never seen again. Days later, her colleague received a plain email from her address. No message. Just one attachment, a digital scan of Zahari's final logbook entry. It read, in full, no turning back. The sky will swallow us, and no one will believe what they find. The file timestamp: March 7, 2014, 10:21 p.m. The same time MH370 disappeared from radar. For years, the world had believed that MH370's black boxes, the flight data recorder, and the cockpit voice recorder were lost forever beneath miles of Indian Ocean water. Governments poured millions into sonar sweeps and underwater drones, but each search ended the same way, with silence. Then, in early 2025, that silence broke. It started inside a cold steel laboratory at the University of Western Australia. A marine acoustics researcher named Dr. Helena Cross was reviewing archived sonar data from the 2018 Ocean Infinity search. Her project had nothing to do with MH370. She was studying whale migration patterns. But when she adjusted the sound filter to isolate low-frequency pulses, she caught something strange, a rhythmic ping that didn't match any marine life. Each pulse was spaced exactly 0.5 seconds apart. Uniform, mechanical, and recorded just 1 hour after MH370's final satellite ping. She replayed it over and over, isolating the signal until it became unmistakable, the signature frequency of an aircraft underwater locator beacon, a black box. But the coordinates didn't match where the search teams had been looking. This one came from thousands of kilometers northwest, near the edge of the Chagos Archipelago, dangerously close to the classified U.S. base on Diego Garcia. Helena knew what she was hearing, and she knew what it meant. But before she could publish her findings, she reached out to Malaysia's Department of Civil Aviation, sending them a detailed report. Within 48 hours, she received a visit from 2 consultants who refused to identify themselves. They confiscated her drives, her backups, even her lab computer. She was told her research had national security implications. That night, Helena made one final backup, a small encrypted file sent to a trusted colleague in Perth named Dr. Thomas Vale. With the subject line, "If I disappear, release this." 3 days later, she was found dead in her apartment. Official cause: carbon monoxide poisoning. Her colleagues never bought it. Dr. Vale opened the file and found a compressed dataset. The sonar pings, analyzed and cross-referenced with known military frequencies. The pattern was clear. At least 3 separate black box locator signals were detected, not one suggesting multiple transmitters, possibly decoys. Someone had wanted search teams to chase the wrong beacons. But the most disturbing part came from the final seconds of one audio file. The faint hum of machinery. Then a human voice, distorted but audible beneath the static. "This is MH." The rest was drowned out. Vale sent the file to a small group of independent investigators who verified its authenticity. But when they tried to upload the evidence online, their posts vanished within hours. One researcher's account was permanently deleted. Another received a cease and desist order from a government agency that wouldn't name itself. For a brief moment, though, the recording leaked onto an aviation forum. Thousands of people heard it, and those few seconds of audio sparked a new wave of questions. If MH370's black box truly pinged near Diego Garcia, how had it traveled that far undetected? And why did the signals seem alive? Weeks later, the forum's admin received an anonymous message containing a single line: "You found the wrong signal." The real one was turned off, and attached a new coordinate. It pointed to a point of ocean floor marked on no official map. Known only to oceanographers as Sector 44B, that's where the final search began. The ship Orpheus left port from Fremantle under a veil of secrecy. No news cameras, no press releases, just a small crew of civilian researchers who knew they weren't supposed to be there. On board was Dr. Thomas Vail, carrying the encrypted data Helena Cross had died for. His goal was simple: reach the coordinates labeled Sector 44B and prove, once and for all, what really happened to Flight MH370. The sea was calm that morning, a mirror of steel beneath the rising sun. But the closer they got to the sector, the more their instruments began to fail. GPS flickered, sonar feeds froze for seconds at a time, and the compass spun erratically, as though something below them was distorting the magnetic field. At 2:14 a.m., the ship's deep tow sonar finally locked onto something massive resting on the ocean floor. It wasn't smooth like rock or coral. It had edges, curves, the unmistakable outline of a fuselage. The crew fell silent. Vail leaned over the monitor, watching the grainy feed from the underwater drone crawl closer until letters began to emerge through the silt. 9mm RD MH370. The room erupted, years of disbelief collapsing into one deafening truth. But as the cheers faded, another shape appeared beside the wreckage. A container, metallic, almost the size of a small car, wedged near the midsection of the fuselage, stenciled on the side. USAF Logistics. Vail stared, speechless. Why would a Malaysian passenger jet be carrying a U.S. military container? The feed crackled. Static flared across the screen, and the drone's camera cut out. When it returned, the container was gone. Only a dark cloud of silt remained, drifting like smoke through the cold, black water. Before they could react, a warning light flashed on the control panel, an incoming transmission. It wasn't a distress call. It was a command override, remotely locking the drone's navigation. Someone else was controlling it. Vail shouted to disconnect the uplink, but it was too late. The monitors filled with noise, a single burst of digital interference that carried a pattern they recognized instantly. The black box ping Helena had recorded years earlier. Then came a voice. Clear, mail.com. You were never supposed to find this. Turn back. The transmission ended, and the drone imploded, pressure hull breached, feed gone. Moments later, a radar contact appeared 10 nautical miles east, an unmarked vessel moving fast. No eyes beacon, no lights. The Orpheus crew killed their engines and drifted in silence. The unidentified ship circled once, then disappeared into the fog, leaving only the smell of diesel and the distant hum of rotors overhead. By sunrise, Vail made a decision. He encrypted every file, every second of sonar data, and uploaded it to a cloud server with one message attached. If I don't make it back, tell them we found it. He never did. When authorities boarded Orpheus days later, they found the vessel abandoned. Equipment smashed, and every hard drive wiped clean. The official report claimed the wreckage detected in Sector 44B was geological. Misinterpretation? No mention of the fuselage. No mention of the container. But deep within a hidden archive, the kind only a few intelligence agencies can access, there's a sealed folder marked MH370 classified. Inside it lies one final sonar image. A bowing 777, resting intact on the ocean floor. Its cockpit windows shattered, but its taillights still faintly glowing red through the dark. The sea, it seems, never forgets. It just keeps its secrets longer than we can hold our breath.